evening of the fourth day, Martine tells Riley and Bastion he's going to Katsuya's to see if Katsuya makes something Martine calls sushi. He also invites Rivri if she's around. Croia is welcome if she wants to go. Theo politely declines. He seems distracted by a leather-bound book full of strange markings. Riley is interested in this food called sushi. Bastion asks if it's like ceviche, and when he got a kind of, he was in. Rivri is highly skeptical of more food from this land, but is growing quite annoyed by the food hating her. She wishes to find a meal that isn't hot, other than the bread Riley had provided her, and she had been using it as a buffer between spices. Croia, on the other hand, is very intrigued by the idea of new food and will readily come along. Martine explained as they walked. He may not even make it, but a lot of the food he makes seems right. If he does, it may or may not be spicy. He directed that at Rivri. If he serves nigiri, it won't be. It's just a strip of raw fish over a grain. It was rice where I come from, but I don't know here. He hadn't slept well in the last couple of nights, but he hoped a taste of home might help. He doubted it with Angie's birthday looming ever closer, but he had to try. If he serves maki, he made an O with his finger and thumb. The rolls, I'll tell you which ones are spicy. Riley was listening but confused, and he was sure that confusion showed up on his face. Rivri hummed and nodded. At least as far as she was told, this may be a meal that she could eat without wanting to die. Croia remembered her brother mentioning a meal similar to what Martine was explaining, but it had been a meal eaten within Lily's realm. As the group walked into Katsuya's restaurant, the man turned to watch them with a very withering stare. The last time this group had come into his home and business, it had led to a lot of heartbreak and a super awkward hug with his mother goddess in front of everyone. The hug part was great. The turning around to find everyone standing there after bawling like a tadpole with a snotty nose and his second eyelid stuck shut was less so. Yes? Bastion sort of raised a hand and smiled awkwardly. Hi. Riley took a look around the space. Greetings, Katsuya, he said and looked over at the man. We are here as patrons this time, I assure you. We're just here for food, promise. Martine held his hands up in a placating gesture. I wanted to make a special request. Do you make sushi? He patted the pocket he stored his coin in, making it jingle. Rivri nodded in greeting, her hands in her pockets. Croia waved, smiling widely. Hello again. We bring no news this time. Katsuya stared over at the group, slow and steady, and then huffed. Where did you hear that word? A friend back home made it, Martine shrugged. I don't think he was deep folk, but it was good. I miss it. I haven't seen him in a while. Katsuya narrowed his eyes, but he nodded slowly and gestured to the bar nearest to the kitchen. Sit. Bastion's ears flicked back, and he looked between the cook and Riley, and when Riley seemed like everything was fine, he slowly went over and hopped on a stool. Riley walked over and sat, his eyes finding a giant green slime that was consuming an entire table in order to clear it of dishes and any mess that had gotten on it. Thank you, Martine dipped his head. It looks like we're in luck. Couple of rules, at least, the way I learned, and so far what I've learned has been pretty spot on. If he brings sauce, try it without first. If you want to try the sauce after, you can. Dip the fish, not the grain, if there is any. He held up the chopsticks. Don't stab with these. If you're not comfortable with them, use your fingers. Rivri was well accustomed to chopsticks. There were similar utensils back home they used for their noodles. It felt good to have something she was used to. Croia, on the other hand, accidentally snapped said chopsticks with her first attempt and looked quite perplexed with what to do. Can I use fingers with clean hands? Clean hands, Bastion muttered as he rubbed his hands together. The telltale scent of prestidigitation's ozone-like cleaning drifted past. Then he offered his hands down the bar to Croia. Clean hands, he chimed again and made a grabby motion. Riley looked over at Bastion and accepted the hand so that his hands could also be clean. Clean hands indeed. Croia smiled and allowed her own hands cleaned as well. Thank you, it is appreciated. It would be much easier for her to simply eat with her hands if this was not a meal to be poked with a utensil. Rivri did not offer her hands, nor did she remove her gloves. Martine held out his hands, if Bastion didn't mind. He'd washed them before coming, but that had been back at the bed and breakfast. Bastion would clean all of the hands that were offered to him and then wait patiently for food to come out. When Katsuya returned, It was later than his usual service, and large plates full of decorative fish rolls, cuts, and other side dishes came out. He was suspicious. The Roan loved fish, but they didn't normally venture far outside of their comfort zone. "Thank you," Bastion smiled when a roll was placed in front of him. When a tray of mochi was placed in front of the doll, he blinked, but then thanked Katsuya again. Katsuya didn't say anything. He simply leaned against the wall behind the bar and waited with his arms crossed. The doll was very excited about the mochi. It tapped the table a few times and then grabbed one and took a bite out of it with a mouth that did not open. Riley thanked Katsuya politely and looked over the food in front of him. It smelled fresh and it would taste very good. Many dishes had been placed in front of the party. More and more fish came out, as Arthur was tasked with bringing the rest. Martine thanked Katsuya with another dip of his head and then gently grabbed one of the nigiri in front of him with his fingers. He was used to chopstick, but nigiri always did try to escape him. The base didn't seem like rice, but it was fairly close. He ignored the sauces placed nearby to stick the piece in his mouth. He didn't recognize the fish. It reminded him of tuna. Solid, meaty, and firm. The grain was rice-like, though a little saltier. It was perfect. He grinned and then gestured to another one. It was a white fish that looked mild. "I think you'll like that one, Rivri. The ones that look like that won't be spicy." And then he was reaching for a roll that did look spicy. "If y'all see anything down on either end, just ask and it could be passed down. We share." Rivri nodded, turning her chopsticks round to grab the roll with the back end that didn't enter the mouth before placing it on her plate. Then she rotated the sticks and lifted the roll again, sliding her mask up her face for her mouth to be exposed while she ate. She hummed softly and nodded, finishing the bites before she muttered, "Yes, this will do, thank you." Croia, on the other hand, also enjoyed one of the spicy options. She was accustomed to some spices in her meals, and had something similar to this, often without the grain, but raw fish was no stranger. Bastion seemed like he was in a staring match with his food as he moved this way and that and tried to figure out how he was supposed to pick it up, flip it over for sauce, and then eat it. The first snack was easy, delicious, but this one, with the added maneuver. He tried it and the fish landed flat in the dark sauce. Bastion's ears lowered and sank a little on his stool. Katsuya's lips tilted up ever so slightly on one side. He reached over and traded out Bastion's chopsticks for a different set with string and paper tied on one end. It was easier. "Thanks." Bastion grumbled a little and went back to trying to conquer his snacks. "Is it to your liking?" Katsuya looked over the group. "It's delicious, thank you." Martine grinned broadly after he finished the bite in his mouth. It wasn't exactly a taste of home, but it was pretty close. He gestured to the grain, seasoned perfectly. Riley went at it with fingers. He wasn't unseasoned in using chopsticks, but when given the option to use his hands, he preferred it. Touching your food and feeling its temperature before you got it to your mouth was part of the experience. He grabbed one of the rolls, pulled it to him, and gave a quick sniff before putting it in his mouth with a deeper inhale in order to get all of the flavors at once. Raw fish was not something he ate often, but it was magnificent cut and very soft on the tongue. Relaxing more on his stool, he grabbed another and repeated the ritual, just as delicious. "So far I haven't found anything I don't like," he said to Katsuya. The green slime gurgled and cleaned behind the group, plates and cups floating inside of him as he did so. As a group ate, they began to get more snacks. Bastion seemed to really enjoy the fish by itself without the added grain, so he got a bowl with fish cuts and a single egg yolk dropped on top, which he began to chomp, chomp, chomp through with his ears perked. Rivri was given more mild, flavorful options. A fancy, spicy tuna roll went in front of Croia. Martine got a sampler of cuts that the others didn't have. Experiments. And Riley got more finger-friendly rolls of different kinds. Croia was very outward with her appreciation, mentioning when a particular cut tasted good and ensuring praise was given while not being overdone. Rivri had more silent gratitudes, light hums, and continued enjoyment without bothering with the sauces. Martine eventually tried the sauces, more out of curiosity than necessity, after eating many pieces of sushi without. He asked Katsuya about the ones he didn't recognize and what he thought of each roll and sauce. Some of the flavor seemed less typical to the table like this and more personal. At least they seemed more personal. Perhaps flavors Katsuya preferred himself. Those were met with smiles and more compliments. A few pieces he found he didn't care for, usually textured, were offered to others. Riley made his enjoyment known. He complimented the ones he really liked, but he ate the ones he found were just fine with the same amount of gusto. Trying sauces opened up a whole other realm of flavors, and he found himself needing to try everything again with each of the different sauces. The doll watched everyone enjoy sushi, lowered its ears to the side, and looked up at the deep folk and put its little paws together. Katsuya sighed at the doll and handed it a plate of fish as well. "Where did you say you were from?" Katsuya asked the one who seemed to be leading the charge into his shop. The strange man, the human with the odd clothing. He had not heard of others eating food like they ate, especially by the same name. It was weird. Martine hesitated, making a slight and a grimace. It's a hard question to answer. He was not about to try and lie to a man that had always seen through him, even if this wasn't the Katsuya he knew. He should have been more careful. He should have described it. Rivri glanced over the two, curious at the sudden hesitation from the man who had come in with gusto only a short while earlier. How interesting. Croia's interest was piqued, but she was not very good at hiding it. But she attempted to, as she continued to eat. "He's from Saint Laurent," Bastion shrugged with his mouth full of fish. "North side." Katsuya crinkled his nose in disgust. "You know how it is." Bastion drank his water. "The fish is the only thing clean in that water." "Accurate," Katsuya hissed and sniffed. "My fish is better." Bastion hid a smile behind his hand that he was using to eat with. The doll used chopsticks perfectly to grab its pieces of fish and drop them into an open seam. How it managed without any fingers would be a mystery for everyone. It even caused Arthur to pause and stare at the display with large slime eyes. Riley did not understand the reference that Bastion had used and looked over with a slightly cocked eyebrow. "How do you do the things that you do?" Rivri asked the doll in bewilderment, confused and struck with confusion. "Bless that kid for giving him an out." "By far better," Martine nodded, agreeing with Bastion as if he hadn't just been scrambling for an explanation that wouldn't ruin everything. He'd have to ask Bastion questions about Saint Laurent so that he could use it as an excuse more easily, patch holes in his story. He tried not to pay too much attention to the spooky down the bar. Like Jack always said, don't look at them, don't acknowledge them, and if they call your name, no they didn't. Bastion waited for Katsuya to go help other customers before he snickered into his bowl and offered exactly 0 explanations for his knife cat behavior. It wasn't exactly his first time doing it, and it wasn't going to be his last. The doll turned to look down the bar, and its gaze could be felt by everyone that it landed on. It scooted closer to the edge of the stool, placed its tiny plush paws on the smooth wood. There was a short beep, and it burped loudly and fell off the stool. Riley watched this whole thing happen. It may be cursed, but it seemed harmless, to a point. Bastion got off the stool to go retrieve it and put it back where it had been. "I think it's neat." Rivri shook her head. "No, I seriously doubt that it's harmless." She spoke, but turned her interest back to the sushi, as it was clear that this thing was either incapable of answering or simply would not be. Croia shrugged one shoulder. "I am assuming it has magic, holding sticks with it." Riley shrugged. "When it climbs up your clothes, you can feel it grabbing on, but when you look at its paws closely, there's no separation in the fingers. It's just sewn to squish the fabric so they look like paws." Riley shivered slightly, remembering it crawling up him the one time. "I'm pretty sure that if it wanted to hurt us, it would have done so by now. Anyone actually paying attention to the doll would have noticed it nod." Martine ignored the feeling of eyes on him and returned to his sushi. Without Katsuya's eyes on him as well, he was more subdued, lost in thought. Katsuya's question had brought back one of the very things he'd been trying to avoid thinking about too much. His thumb rubbed Angie's name absently. "It kept me warm." Bastion stood behind the plush and patted its head. "When I first got here, I didn't have money, so I just kind of bummed around. And it kept me warm out in the rain, so I think it's fine." Rivri nodded. "It is harmless to us, it seems. Doesn't make it harmless entirely." She simply continued, patting her mouth clean and then returning her mask to her face. Croia raised a brow. "I am correct in the magic, then. If it is capable of keeping you warm, I am wondering where it came from." The doll pressed its hand up to the hand that patted it, and when Bastion pulled his hand away, it grabbed his hand and pulled it back for more pats. Riley shrugged. "I think it just kind of appeared when we were on the ship." Croia pressed her lips together. "You have got to be kidding me," she muttered before slightly returning to her food. Her theory of Martine also being sent by Lily expanded further to the doll, which only raised more questions. Martine looked up and over at Riley. He had also just appeared on that ship. Then again, haunted objects were prone to just appearing. "It's a nice little dude." Bastion shrugged again and scratched the weird knot for her head. "A little ugly, but I'm not going to judge it for that." "We do not judge Riley for it. Why would the doll be any different?" Rivri muttered, not realizing she had spoken loud enough to be heard as she unwittingly dissed the man in the way she'd seen them teasing him earlier. Riley made a truly offended noise and stared over at Rivri. "How dare!" He tossed the braid back. "I'm a catch, I'll have you know," he said with a huff. Croia nodded. "Yes, he is very easy to catch. I have twice when he has tried to run away." Bastion continued snickering into his fish noodles and shook his head. It would be a good day, and maybe, just maybe, with this group, they'd all make it through this thing alive. Martine chuckled at the group, glad that almost everyone had decided to come. It was a pity about Theo, but to be honest, he didn't even know if Theo cared to be part of the group. He would have thought the same about Rivri up until yesterday down at the beach. But Theo, well, Theo hadn't been keen to change that perception. The book he'd been looking through seemed like a logbook, and he was probably busy. He seemed like a busy guy. He held his hand up to signal Katsuya as he saw the others beginning to wind down and set plates aside. He really hoped he could afford all of this. He hadn't exactly known what it would cost, and he hoped he could pay for it. He had invited all of them, after all. Katsuya slipped him a tab and walked around the back. "Arthur will take the money on the way out." Whenever Martine flipped it over, there was nothing written on it. Martine smiled and then began to gather plates to take to Arthur. If Katsuya wasn't going to accept payment, the least he could do was be a good guest and not leave a mess. He slipped his hand in his pocket to pull a garnet as well and tucked it in with the plates that he handed Arthur. Katsuya sees it and makes meaningful eye contact and allows Arthur to hold on to it until there was no it left to hold. Martine watched the coin dissolve and frowned. There was one of his rare but occasional missteps with Katsuya. Well, there went one of his coins. Rather than a gentle head bob, he bowed at the waist toward Katsuya and held it, hoping that the gesture was as much of an apology to the deep folk as it was in his world. He could only guess and hope that it was the same. Arthur had spit out the plates before he dissolved the coin, making sure that it was at eye level before he rolled over the plates and took them to the kitchen to be rinsed. As he passed Bastion, the plush reached out and gave the slime a hug. This made the slime giggle, and he made sure to roll over the bar to get everything nice and shiny clean before vanishing into the kitchen with all of the dishes. "Whoops!" Bastion rubbed the back of his head and grinned sheepishly as possible before booking it out of there. "Have a nice day." It was Katsuya for apology accepted, but get the hell out. Rivri made a point of getting out of there as soon as they'd seen the slime dissolve the money. She had liked that food and wished to keep receiving it. She did not wish to be banned. Croia, on the other hand, was nosy and only left once there seemed to be an exchange of an apology. Riley chuckled, but otherwise made his way to the door. Honestly, he had eaten so much a nap might be on the schedule. Martine straightened and waved as he cleared the door. "You too, thank you." Well, that could have gone worse. He was down a garnet, but Katsuya hadn't rejected the apology. Money could be earned.